For centuries, researchers have been trying to determine the location of Atlantis. This mythical empire was apparently swallowed up by the ocean eons ago, but no one really knows where this apocalyptic event happened, or whether Atlantis ever even existed in the first place. Everyone seems to have their own theory. Some say Atlantis was located near the Azores Islands. Others claim that the Richat Structure is the graveyard of this once proud city. Still others say that this Atlantean Empire once stood on the now-sunken mid-Atlantic ridge. But there are those who have a very different idea about Atlantis. They say the ruins of this lost empire are sitting in plain sight, in North America.
Approximately 51 million people entering another
surveillance camera capturing the
unidentified flying
lockdowns and mass testing.
I'm there today that the world is going to end.
First, let's look at archaeological evidence regarding the first people in the Americas. For a very long time, researchers believed that these were the Clovis people. This was a very distinct Paleo-American culture that appeared about 11,000 years ago, crossing the Beringian land bridge to reach North America before moving into Mexico and South America. Archaeologists can easily identify Clovis settlements, because these people crafted their arrowheads and spear points in a very distinct manner. 80% of all living Native American people are descended from these early settlers. But these were not the first people to reach the Americas. The Clovis first hypothesis has been completely shattered, and there is evidence of people arriving in the Americas as early as 60,000 years ago. In fact, some early sites suggest that Neanderthals could have been living in North America 130,000 years ago. Some people believe that these early settlers used Stone Age technology very similar to that used by early European humans, such as the Solutrean people. Some even say that the first American settlers navigated across the Atlantic, settling first on the east coast long before the Clovis people arrived via the Berignian land bridge. Although this theory is highly controversial, it would suggest that the first settlers of the Americas were actually European. Proponents of this theory state that these ancient Europeans could have moved across the ice-packed Atlantic Ocean, hunting whales and other marine animals before reaching the east coast. Some say that for thousands of years, there were many different cultures living in the Americas at the same time. The Native Americans themselves say as much in their legends. Many of these oral traditions speak of white giants with red hair and colored eyes living alongside the First Nations people. While this is a controversial theory, it is by no means a conspiracy theory. In 2013, Smithsonian published an article entitled, "The Very First Americans May Have Had European Roots." A number of mysterious burial grounds exists throughout the United States. Many people simply attribute them to the Native American people of that time period, but others aren't so sure. If there was more than one ethnic group living in North America thousands of years ago, then what if these mounds were created by a civilization that arrived before the Native Americans? Many of the mounds were apparently built when modern First Nations people were active in the region, but numerous tribes claim that giants and mysterious races were the ones who built these structures. In addition, skeletons have been excavated from some of these mounds, and these skeletons are often incredibly tall. Aside from the mounds, there are also a number of ruined stone walls found throughout the United States. For example, The Berkeley Mystery Walls in California's Bay Area raise many interesting questions. No one really knows how or why they were built, and the local Ohlone people say that these walls have always been there. Another notable site is the Serpent Mound in Ohio. Mainstream researchers can't seem to agree on when this mound was actually built, but some believe that it could be thousands of years old. Alternative historian Graham Hancock believes that it could be 13,000 years ago, and he bases this hypothesis on the structure's alignment with the summer solstice sunset. There are also unconfirmed reports of giant skeletons being found at Serpent Mound. You also have to consider that when Europeans came into contact with Native Americans after the arrival of Columbus, many of the tribes were clearly nomadic. They didn't build permanent structures, so where did these mounds come from? It's worth noting that European settlers after Columbus used these mounds to justify the genocide of the First Nations people. They claimed that the mounds had been created by their ancestors, so they were justified in wiping out the natives. While the genocide was obviously wrong, we shouldn't dismiss the possibility of an older civilization in the United States just because of this dark episode in human history. It's no secret that modern Native Americans carry a significant amount of European DNA. For many years, it was assumed that this was due to an admixture with modern European settlers after the arrival of Columbus. However, new evidence suggests that Native Americans were mixing with Europeans long before this period. Some tribes carry the mitochondrial lineage X, which is only found among European people. Ancient skulls found in North America have notable European features, and are devoid of features typically associated with Asians. So there were ancient people living in the Americas long before the First Nations tribes, and there is evidence of ancient mounds and walls across North America. Could this have been the mythical empire of Atlantis? Maybe. If it's true, then what about the flood? This is perhaps the most important part of the legend of Atlantis, and it involves the ancient empire being completely destroyed without a trace. This helps explain why very little evidence of its existence has ever been found. As it turns out, some of the biggest floods in Earth's history happened in North America. The glacial Lake Missoula outburst occurred about 17,000 years ago, literally carving away the land and scraping everything on the surface away. This apocalyptic event formed the channeled Scablands. While the exact cause of the flood is a topic for another story, it would have been experienced by the inhabitants of North America at that time. And since the Clovis people first arrived on the continent 11,000 years ago, the people who experienced this massive flood would have been a completely different earlier civilization. When it comes to ancient civilizations, most people think about Egypt, Rome, or Mesopotamia, but the truth is that there are plenty of ancient mysteries right under our feet here in North America. While these mysteries are stuck in a quagmire of controversy and political correctness, one day the truth may come out. And when it does, our entire understanding of history could change.